graduate from Kent State University. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make a face mask. First thing you need is a pattern. I found my pattern on Pinterest. It's got a bunch of different sizes on it, both adult and youth sizes. So I'm going to be making the adult medium size today. As far as supplies, you need a 12-inch cut of fabric. Most cotton is wide enough to get all 4 pieces out of it, but if you want contrasting fabric, which is what I'm doing today, you can get a smaller piece than that. But you also need thread. I am using white thread today just so it's easier for you guys to see, and I am going to be using 1/4-inch elastic today. If you don't have elastic available to you, you can use ribbon, you can use cording, you can even use shoelaces if you have other shoelaces laying around. So the first step is cutting out your pieces. I already have mine cut out. I'm using some Star Wars fabric with some droids on it, and I'm going to use this orange tie-dye fabric on the inside as a coordinating fabric. Okay, so after you get your pieces cut out, I have them pinned together. So my pattern calls for 3/8 seam allowance, which is the edge of my presser foot, so I'm going to follow the edge of my presser foot. And always make sure you backstitch when you're sewing. Alright, so there you can see we've got the 3/8 seam allowance sewn there, and I'll go ahead and do this other piece. Alright, and there's that one as well. So next step, go ahead and trim your threads, that way you don't have to do it later. Okay. The next step is going to be taking your pieces, and we're going to cut little triangles along the seam allowance, which will help with the curve of the fabric. That way it actually forms to the face. So the way that I do it, I go down the seam allowance one way, and I'll show you guys here in a second. I go down one way so that it's diagonals all going the same way, all the way down, and then I'll go back and I'll do triangles back across. This part isn't necessary, but it makes it a lot easier when you're going and sewing the 2 pieces together. But it'll look like that when you're done, kind of like a dinosaur. So once you're done with that, we'll go ahead and open it up, and that'll be the shape of your mask. And this will be on the inside. I'll set that piece aside and we can do this other one. Alright, so there's that one. So what we're going to do, we're going to open it up, and we're going to take our iron, and we're just going to kind of press this seam over. That way it's more flat on the inside, and it'll actually hold that shape. We'll do the same on the other piece. Since this one's on the outside, we're going to turn it right side out. And then we'll do the same thing. Okay, so that's going to be our outside piece. Okay, so next step, we're going to take the two pieces that we've sewn together and we're going to put them right sides together so that the wrong side is facing us. When I pin these together, I try to match up the corners as well as the seam down the middle. That way they fit together more easily. Okay, so when we're sewing this, we're going to go around the entire edge of the fabric. And we're going to leave about 1.5 inches to 2 inches open so that we can turn it inside out. So when I start sewing, I'm going to start on one side of that opening, and once I get all the way around, I'll end up on the other side of that opening. And this is also at 3/8 of an inch, so I'm going to follow the edge of my presser foot again. So when you get to your corner, you're going to put the needle down and lift up the presser foot so that you can turn the fabric, and then you can keep going along the next side. It's going to have the 3/8 inch stitching. You can turn it around. We're going to have this opening here, so we're going to turn it through this little hole. Before you turn it, I always suggest clipping your corners. That way the corner will actually be pointed when you turn it right side out. So the way you do that, you just follow around the curve there. I'll show you on this side. That way it's curved when you go to turn your corners. And then on my pattern, it's got a spot here that kind of curves toward the chin on the bottom. So I'm going to cut a triangle out here. That way that curve is still there when I turn it right side out. Okay, so there's that. And then along the top edge, I just kind of cut about every 3/4 of an inch. That way the top edge is able to flex around your face more easily instead of being fitted. It'll fit to your face better. Now we're going to turn it right side out. I always grab an opposite corner, that way it's kind of easy to pull through. Okay, so it's going to look like that when you're done. I always go back in. I have a point turner, so I go in through the little opening and I'll poke the corners out. That way, instead of looking like that, it'll look more like that. So I go through and poke those out. So there's that. On both sides, we've got our corners turned. I am going to turn it so that the orange is inside the blue. And then I'm going to use my iron and I'm going to press the seams so that they're flat. It's easier if you iron it from the inside part, because that way you can have that curve there and you can turn it. It's going to look kind of like that on the inside so that you can't see the orange from the outside. So it's going to look like this once you're done ironing it. The seams are going to be flat. It's going to look like that from the inside, where you can see a little bit of the blue. So our next step is going to be top stitching. So we're going to take the edge of our fabric, and instead of sewing it 3/8 of an inch, we're going to sew it 1/8. On my presser foot, I always follow the inside part of this little arm here. That way I have something as a guide instead of the little line on my sewing machine. It just makes it easier to follow. So I'm going to get this set up here. And then we're just going to sew all the way around, including over the opening that we had. When you sew over that part, make sure that both pieces of the opening are folded in and actually flat. That way they don't look weird when you're done sewing. But I'm going to sew this here. Now when you get to the center seam, it's going to be a lot more bulky than the rest of it. So I always turn it kind of inside out. That way it's easier for me to flatten that as I go over it. Okay, now if you get stuck on a corner because it's too thick, you can use your point turner, you can use like a pencil or something. I always try to push the corner through, that way it actually sews instead of being stuck on that point. But make sure that you don't use your fingers because you don't want anything to happen. Alright, and once you're done there, you're going to have the edge stitching along all the sides. That way it won't get all weird once you wash it and everything. It'll keep its shape. So the next step is going to take this edge here and we're going to fold it over. We're going to fold it over about a 1/2 inch. I like using my hemming ruler with my iron, that way I know that the crease is perfect. And it's going to look like that once you're done. So we're going to do it to the other side now. Alright, so now we've got both sides like that. We're going to take that and we're going to sew right along the edge here. That way we can feed our elastic or ribbon or cording through it and be able to have enough space. So I'm going to, I'll show you guys where I'm going to line it up. We're going to line it up to the inside oval spot here. We're going to line up the edge of the fabric to that, the fold on this side. We're going to line that up there, and then I'm going to move my needle over using the zigzag setting on my machine. I have it set at 5 for the middle, and if I want it over to the left hand side, it'll be set at a 0. So alright, so it's going to look like that. Once you're done, you're going to have 2 stitching lines on that side, and then you're going to have 1 on that side. And we're going to do the same thing to the other side. Alright, so now we've got our mask here. We've got the little channels for the elastic to go through. So, the easiest way to get elastic through something is with a little safety pin. I always put it in on the end here, that way you can feed it through and have something to pull on. So I'm going to alright, so it's going to look like that once you have it fed through. We're going to do that to the other side as well. I cut my pieces of elastic at approximately 14 inches. That's not necessarily the size that I need to go around my ear, but I'll be able to tie it where it feels comfortable on my face. Alright, so there's that one as well. We're going to take our mask. We're going to have it on our face. And then we're going to take the one side, we're going to grab both ends, we're going to kind of hold it behind our ear to see where it's comfortable. Okay, so that's where mine's going to be. I'm going to take this and I'm going to tie them together. It's just going to be a little knot there. And then I'm going to put it back on. Just make sure it's still comfortable. That way it's not pulling my ear. We'll have it like that. So, I'm going to make sure it's nice and tight so that it doesn't pop off when you're wearing it. And then what you're going to do, you're going to take these little tails and we're going to cut them so there's still a little bit there. That way there's still room to adjust if you need it. But it's just going to be... And then what you're going to do, you're going to kind of rotate the elastic so that the knot is on the inside. That way it's not stuck on your ear and uncomfortable to wear. So it's going to look like that when you're done. It's going to be the flat edge of the elastic and the knot is right here on the inside. Twist this. If it doesn't loop correctly, where it gets kind of twisted, you can take the knot back out and you can just kind of like pinch right next to the knot and kind of twist it. That way it'll readjust itself and then you can pull it back. That way it's flat and it's not twisted, it's not pulling weird. So then it'll sit behind your ear and not pull. Alright, so now we'll do the other side. I'll put this side on. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing. We're going to take our edges, we're going to loop them behind our ear. Make sure it's not pulling too much to one side. We'll pinch off where it's comfortable. So then you have both sides of elastic on, and then you can wear your little face mask. This one's a little too big for my face, so I'll probably make the smaller size next time, but then you've got something to wear. You can also make it so that It goes through the channel, but it's able to be tied around your head. But I don't like having things around my head, so I just chose to do the ones around the ears. But there's your face mask. You are all set and ready to go. And I hope everybody stays safe out there, and I look forward to seeing your guys' masks. Thanks!